So, I put a little presentation together for this message today. A few images of things that frighten us. So are you scared yet? I am. Bugs. I don't like bugs. Okay, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, in his first inaugural address, said probably the most famous thing anyone has ever said about fear. He said, "First of all, let me assert my firm belief," that's my FDR voice, "let me assert my firm belief that the only thing we have to fear is fear itself." Really? Who was he kidding? Do you see all those things we have to be afraid of? Look at this next slide. This is a guy who's putting together a mural. You can't read those, you don't have to. The point is, those are all things that we can be afraid of, that people are afraid of. Being alone, getting sick, our kids getting sick, our kids doing drugs, losing our jobs, losing our income, our homes. War, death, crowds, fear of change, mental illness, hospitalization, injury, fear of ridicule. How about abuse? At home, at work, even in the nursing home? Of course, snakes, bugs, heights. The number one fear of Americans today, anybody know? Number one fear? Nope.
Public speaking.
Public speaking. Where the human brain starts working the moment you were born and never stops until you stand up to speak in public. It's true. But I could go on and on, but I think you get my point. We have plenty of things to fear. But listen to what FDR says next, because nobody ever remembers to say the next half of the quote. And I think this is the best part. The only thing we have to fear is fear itself. And he goes on, nameless, unreasoning, unjustified terror which paralyzes needed efforts to convert retreat into advance. Now that's a mouthful. Let me say it one more time. Nameless, unreasoning, unjustified terror, which paralyzes needed efforts to convert retreat into advance. In other words, he's talking about that unidentified fear that freezes us up and makes us stay home when we should get out and get going. It's that unknown thing that we all have that keeps us in our chairs when we should be getting up and doing something. Now, FDR, it seems, knew a little something about fear. As a little background, born into an atmosphere of privilege, look at him in his little jumpers riding around, right? Those were the days. Frequent trips to Europe as a boy made Roosevelt conversant in German and French. He learned to ride and to shoot and to row. He learned to play polo and lawn tennis. He also took up golf and sailing. Even as an adult, he was extremely active and he loved outdoor activities until, in 1921, at the age of 39, he was diagnosed with paralytic poliomyelitis. Polio. Although, I was reading that there's a more recent study in 2003 which favors a diagnosis of Guillain-Barré syndrome. For those of you who are keeping track, it may not have been polio. 11 years later, it doesn't really matter, does it? 11 years later, he defeated Herbert Hoover to become the longest-serving president in United States history. In his first term as president, he faced the Great Depression, instituting his New Deal. In his second term, he faced Adolf Hitler in World War II. And in his third term as President of the United States, he saw the Japanese invasion of Pearl Harbor. Yes, I think FDR knew a little something about fear. Now by now, over the last 8 months, if you've been paying attention, you know that I am a recovering alcoholic and addict. I mean, I only mention it in every single message that I give. And I do that because it's such a huge part of my story. In fact, it really is my story. It's such a huge part of what makes me the person that I am today. In fact, this past week, on Wednesday, June 26th at 9 a.m., I celebrated 10 years of sobriety. In a row. No, but it took me 20 years to get 10 years of sobriety. It took me 20 years. And why did it take me 20 years to get any length of continuous sobriety? Because I was afraid. I was afraid of something. Fear. I was paralyzed by the fear that I would have to live without my best friend and lover, my companion, drugs and alcohol, my partner in life. How can you live without them? I couldn't imagine. I would begin to get sober, but then I would start to feel again, and I would feel terribly overwhelmed by the fear that I might have to actually change, that my life would be something other than what it is, which on one hand it seems is a good thing, and on the other hand it's so terribly frightening. And so I would drink. I was afraid that I might have to get up and get out of the house. I might have to go do something productive with my life. Maybe not even something productive, but I would just have to get up and go do something, right? Paralyzed by fear, I would procrastinate finding that job or applying for school, which is why it took me until 2008 to graduate with a bachelor's degree on the 45-year plan. Fear. Whatever would be the next step toward becoming a normal, healthy person in society, I was afraid. I was just afraid to do it. But this time it's different. This time, I have something to focus on instead of the fears. I have my church. I have my service to others. I have my youth. I think without those things, I would not be the man I am today. I have my Jesus. Peter figured it out. Peter figured it out after he stepped out of the boat and after Jesus reached out his hand and helped him back in. The Sea of Galilee really is a lake. For a lake, it's big. For a sea, not so much. 13 miles long and only 7 miles across at the widest point. However, if you've been there, and even if you haven't, I'm going to just tell you, the wind can come up extremely suddenly. It comes howling out of the Golan Heights. It turns the lake into something resembling a blender. You know, with the wind shifting suddenly from this direction and from that direction. And Peter and the disciples knew that they were in trouble because Peter and the boys had been working that lake for years. That's how they made their living, right? They knew it, that they were in trouble. And what should have taken an hour at most to cross the lake. I mean, you're not going to leave at 9 o'clock at night to cross the lake in a boat if you think it's going to take you all night to do it. I wouldn't think. I wouldn't. But what should have taken an hour turned into an all-night battle, and the wind whipped the sails around, and the waves crashed over the tiny boat, and the disciples found themselves in the middle of the sea, tossed about by waves. And I love when the Bible does this, because you know what? It's a metaphor. I love metaphors. In the middle of the sea, tossed about by waves. And get this, all you have to do is change a couple of words and get a really good description of your own life, or many of our lives. How about this? In the middle of my addiction, tossed about by cravings. How about in the middle of foreclosure, tossed about by creditors? In the middle of a divorce, tossed about by guilt. Fill in your own. In the middle of tossed about by. And the disciples fought the storm for about 9 hours. 9 hours. 9 hours in a tiny wooden boat with no motor in the dark until about 4 a.m. Now, the original Greek translation says it was in the third watch of the night. And the watches were about 3 hours long. There was 9 to 12, 12 to 3, and 3 to 6. And the third watch then is about 4 a.m. in the morning. And they saw something that none of them expected. They were a superstitious bunch. They were more willing to believe that it was a ghost than that it was actually Jesus. Okay. They were like that back then. But, you know, the thing is, they would expect to see a ghost out there, I suppose. We don't expect to see Jesus in the middle of our challenges, do we? We don't expect to see Jesus there. Why would we? We expect to see Jesus in our devotionals in the morning. We expect to see Jesus at Easter, certainly. We expect to see Jesus at Christmas. Jesus is there. We expect to see Jesus in our hymns and in worship during retreats and praise time and meditations. That's where we look for Jesus. That's where we expect to see Jesus. Where we don't expect to see Jesus is in a foreclosure or in a layoff. We don't expect to see Jesus in a lawsuit or a divorce or a war or cancer. I never thought I would see Jesus in the depths of my addiction. We don't expect to see Jesus in the storm. But I'll tell you, it's in the storms that Jesus does his best work. And do you know why? It's because during our storms and our challenges is when Jesus gets our fullest attention. Where have you been? There you are. And Jesus' response to the disciples' fear is classic. This is so Jesus. We should have it inscribed on every wall and over every doorway. It should be there. Take courage. Don't be afraid. I am here. 3 really powerful words, if you think about it. When a child spots a parent or a grandparent in the audience at the game or the play or that big recital, how awesome is it? The parent says, I'm here. Right? That changes everything. When you lose your job but you feel the support of your family or your friends, we're here for you. What do you need? Don't worry. Or if you wake up in the hospital and you hear the whisper of your spouse in your ear, I'm here. I'm here. When I came back to my church choir after falling off the wagon in Florida again, we're here was the best feeling for me. Like it didn't matter what mistakes I had made. You know, can we give you a ride to the store? What can we do for you? We're here. And maybe that's why God says it over and over and over again in the Bible, because He means it. I Googled this, and so it must be true because I read it on the internet. The Bible says, don't be afraid 365 times. Do you think that's a coincidence? I don't. You are in me, I am in you, says Jesus. And Paul is convinced nothing can separate us from the love of God. Nothing. When I found God, I discovered something. Let me share this little secret with you. When I found God, I found out that God wasn't lost. God knew right where He was. I was lost. God was right there with me the whole time. And if it weren't for my struggle with sobriety, I would never have looked. If it weren't for the very storm itself, Peter would probably not have gotten out of the boat. Max Lucado, in his book, Fearless, remarks that if the weather had been fine and the lake had been smooth, the disciples would probably have clapped and cheered. Way to go, Jesus, you're the man, that was awesome, cool trick. How'd you do that? But do you think anyone would have been motivated to actually step out of the boat? The storms and challenges prompt us to do things that we would not normally do. There's courage there. And for a few incredible, breathtaking moments, Peter walked on the water. He actually walked on water. Newtonian physics took a hike. Displacement theory went out the window. The laws of nature, Peter defied gravity all over the place that day. Peter didn't start to sink until what? He looked away. He looked away from the Lord. He turned his attention to the storm. And just for a second, he lost sight of Jesus. And who wouldn't? Maybe the waves piled up so high between them he couldn't see him anymore. Maybe the wind crashed the sail behind him like a whip, and it startled him. It wouldn't be, walking on the water, that's scary enough, right? I know I'm going to sink like a rock here any minute. Maybe there was some lightning. But the fact remains that when Peter shifted his attention away from Jesus and toward the squall, he sank like a brick. Give the storm waters more attention than the storm walker and get ready to do the same. Unlike some of us, though, Peter didn't flounder in the rough water for 20 years. He flailed around for a second and quickly cried out, "Lord, save me!" Right back to it. And guess what happened? Jesus immediately reached out and took him by the hand. I love that picture. That there is life. And when they climbed into the boat, the wind died down. Oh, wait a minute. Did you catch that? After they climbed into the boat together, The wind died down. Jesus could have calmed those waves hours earlier. We know he could. You just raise your hand and go, peace, right? And all of the waves and the wind and the lightning and the storms just stops, right? He did it before. He could have done that. 9 hours earlier he could have done that. But he didn't. What's up with that? I mean, even when he wasn't preaching, Jesus was teaching. Jesus could have calmed all of our storms long ago. But he hasn't. Why? Why not? Why do I have to go through this for so long? Because our challenges teach us lessons that we need. If not for ourselves, for our neighbors. Valuable lessons, one of which is storms are not an option. Letting fear paralyze you in your chair is totally optional. Jesus is the master and commander of every storm. So in what storm do you find yourself being tossed around? Are you scared? And keep your focus on the Lord. And remember Jesus' words, fear not, for I am with you. Now I'm going to close up. I wasn't going to put another video on, but I found this, I'm pretty sure God put this video on my Facebook page last week. It's a bit of an homage to James Gandolfini, the head of the Sopranos, among other things. And it's a great statement about fear.
Don't worry, so everything's okay.
Thank you. I feel much better now.
Well, I'm glad. Because I know what it's like to be scared.
You get scared?
Yeah, sure, everybody gets scared sometimes.
Really? Well, what scares you?
Well, there are 3 things that scare me, Zoe.
Oh, don't joke me. Well, what 3 things scare you?
Well, one thing I'm afraid of is the dark. I've always been afraid of the dark. But luckily, I have my nightlight and my teddy bear, and they make me feel better.
Oh, that's good.
Want to know what else scares me?
Yeah, what else?
Getting a haircut.
Really?
Yeah, I'm afraid of haircuts. But luckily, the barber gives me a lollipop, and that makes me feel better. So you see, though, sometimes I get scared too.
Yeah. Oh, but wait a minute. You said there were 3 things that you were scared of. What else are you afraid of?
Giant talking vegetables.
Giant talking vegetables?
But luckily, I've never seen one of them.
Hey, excuse me,
Are you okay?
Yeah, but that giant talking vegetable scared me.
Oh, well, don't worry, Mr. Gandolfini. I know what to do to make you feel better.
You know what?
This. Better?
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah. Thanks.
You're welcome.
Thanks a lot.
So all you need is a lollipop and a teddy bear and a hug, ready to give to your neighbor. Amen.